My brother was always the golden child. Parents paid his rent, bought him a house, even cleared his debts. At Christmas dinner, he found out I quietly built a $25 million company on my own. He fell to the floor crying and demanded I give him at least $15 million while mom screamed that I stole his future. The smell of roasted pine and cinnamon always felt like a lie. It was supposed to be the scent of warmth, of family, of belonging. For me, it was the annual fragrance of my own erasure. Every Christmas, I would sit at my parents' meticulously set dining table and slowly disappear. I'd become a ghost, a polite placeholder, a quiet spectator to the grand opera of my brother, Leo. This year, however, the ghost decided to haunt the banquet. It all came crashing down over the glazed ham, right between the third chorus of "Isn't Leo's new business idea brilliant?" and the fourth time my mother refilled his wine glass while mine sat empty. My father had just proposed a toast. "To family," he'd said, his voice thick with a sentimentality he only ever performed on holidays. He raised his glass, his eyes fixed exclusively on his son, and to Leo's continued success. "We know this is your year, son." I watched Leo preen, a man of 32 who still lived on an allowance, basking in the glow of parental faith that defied all logic and evidence. He had never held a job for more than 6 months. His brilliant business ideas were a graveyard of debt my parents had faithfully buried with their retirement savings. First, it was the artisanal dog biscuit bakery that failed because he was allergic to flour. Then came the bespoke unicycle delivery service that somehow nobody in our suburban town wanted. His latest venture was an app for rating public restrooms, an idea he was convinced would make him a tech mogul. My mother, beaming, added her part to the toast. "We are so proud of the man you're becoming, Leo. Your father and I will always be your biggest supporters." She patted his hand, a gesture of such profound and unconditional adoration that it physically hurt to watch. I took a slow sip of my water, the ice cubes clinking against the glass, a tiny, cold sound in the warm room. I hadn't been asked a single question about my life since I'd arrived 3 hours earlier. Not about my work, not about my home, not about my health. It was the usual script. I was the reliable, low-maintenance daughter, the one who didn't need anything, the one who could be ignored. It was my Uncle Robert, my mother's brother, and the only person in the family who ever looked me in the eye, who broke the spell. He was a retired accountant, a man who believed in balance sheets and tangible results. He turned to me, his expression kind but pointed. "And what about you, Chloe? I heard through the grapevine that your little software project is doing quite well. Someone at my old firm mentioned your company, Aether Solutions, in a tech journal. Said you were making waves." A hush fell over the table. My mother's smile tightened into a thin, disapproving line. My father cleared his throat and suddenly became fascinated by the pattern on his napkin. Leo just stared, a forkful of sweet potato casserole halfway to his mouth, his expression one of pure, unadulterated confusion. My little software project was how they'd always referred to it, a hobby, a cute little thing I did on my computer in my spare time. They had never once asked for details. They couldn't have named my company if $1 million depended on it. I decided in that moment that I was done being a ghost. I was done being small to make them feel comfortable. I placed my water glass down with a soft, deliberate click. "It's doing okay, Uncle Robert. We actually just closed our Series B funding round last month. It went better than expected." "Series B?" Leo scoffed, finally swallowing his food. "What's that like? You get a new office chair?" He laughed, a braying sound meant to belittle and dismiss. My father chuckled along weakly, eager to restore the natural order of things where Leo was the center of the universe and I was a distant moon. "Not quite," I said, my voice even and calm. It was a calmness I had practiced for years, a shield against their casual cruelty. It was a significant investment round. The valuation of the company came in at $25 million. Silence. Not the polite, awkward silence from before. This was a deep, profound, vacuum-sealed silence. The air in the room seemed to thin and crackle. My father's hand, holding his wine glass, froze mid-air. My mother's face went slack, her carefully constructed holiday cheer melting away to reveal the raw shock beneath. Leo's fork slipped from his fingers and clattered onto his plate, the sound as loud as a gunshot. 25 million, my mother whispered, the words catching in her throat. She looked at me as if I were a stranger, as if I'd just announced I was from another planet. Leo's face had gone from smug to pale to a mottled, furious red. His jaw worked silently, his eyes wide with disbelief and something else, something ugly and possessive. "No," he said, his voice a choked squeak. "No, you're lying. You're making that up to ruin Christmas." "Why would I lie about that, Leo?" I asked, keeping my gaze level, and then it happened. The carefully curated facade of our family dinner didn't just crack, it exploded. Leo's face crumpled, his lower lip began to tremble, and his eyes filled with tears. It wasn't the quiet, dignified grief of a man, it was the theatrical, world-ending tantrum of a toddler who had just had his favorite toy snatched away. He pushed his chair back violently, the legs screeching against the hardwood floor, and then he slid out of it, collapsing into a heap on the floor, his body racked with great, gulping sobs. "It's not fair!" he wailed, his voice muffled by the expensive Persian rug. "It's not fair. That should be mine. It should have been me." My father shot up from his chair, rushing to his son's side. "Leo! Leo, son! What's wrong? Get up, get up!" He tried to haul him to his feet, but Leo was a dead weight of self-pity. But it was my mother's reaction that truly hollowed me out. She didn't look at her grown son sobbing on the floor. She turned her gaze on me, and her eyes were filled with a venomous, white-hot rage that I had never seen before. It was the look of pure betrayal. "What have you done?" she hissed, her voice low and trembling with fury. I was speechless. "What have I done? I haven't done anything. You did this." this?" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me, her face contorted. "This whole time you've been hoarding this money, while your brother struggled, while we sacrificed everything for him. You just sat there, quietly, getting rich. You let him fail." The accusation was so monstrous, so profoundly illogical, that I couldn't process it at first. I felt a dizzying sense of unreality, as if the floor had dropped out from under me. Let him fail? Mom, I didn't even know he was. I mean, his choices are his own. My success has nothing to do with him. It has everything to do with him, she screamed, her voice rising to a fever pitch. The festive decorations, the twinkling lights, the perfectly roasted ham, it all seemed like a surreal backdrop to this waking nightmare. We gave him every advantage. We poured everything we had into him because he was the one with the potential, the big ideas. You were supposed to be the sensible one, the quiet one. You were never meant for this kind of success. You've upset the balance. You stole his future. Stole his future? The words echoed in my ears. I looked at my brother, still sobbing on the floor, my father pathetically trying to comfort him. I looked at my mother, her face a mask of righteous fury on behalf of her failing son, and I realized that in her mind, my success was not my own. It was a resource, a family commodity that had been allocated to the wrong child. I hadn't earned it. I had embezzled it from Leo's destiny. Leo, hearing his mother's defense, seemed to find a new surge of energy. He pushed himself up onto his knees, his face tear-streaked and puffy. He pointed at me, his expression a grotesque mix of desperation and demand. "She's right. It's not fair. You have to fix this, Chloe." "Fix what, Leo?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "You have to give it to me," he cried, his voice breaking. "You don't need all that money. You don't even know what to do with it. I have plans. I have the app. You have to give me at least $15 million. It's only fair. You owe me that. You owe us $15 million. He said it as if he were asking to borrow $20 for gas. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it finally broke through my shock and ignited a cold, hard rage deep in my core. This was it. This was the culmination of a lifetime of being sidelined, of my achievements being minimized and his failures being subsidized. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a malfunctioning support system for their golden boy. "No," I said. The word was small, but it landed in the room with the force of a physical blow. "What?" Leo stammered. "No," I repeated, louder this time. I stood up, my hands flat on the table, my own chair scraped back, a sound of finality. "I am not giving you a single cent. Not now. Not ever. This money is mine. I earned it. I worked for it while you were playing at being an entrepreneur with mom and dad's money. My future is not a slush fund for your failures." My mother gasped as if I'd slapped her. "How dare you speak to your brother like that? After everything we've done for you, what have you done for me?" I shot back, the dam of my restraint finally breaking. "You paid for my state school tuition, and I am grateful for that. But since I graduated, have you ever once helped me? You paid Leo's rent for a decade. You bought him a house he is currently about to lose to foreclosure because he invested the mortgage payments in cryptocurrency. You cleared his credit card debts 3 separate times. You paid for his cars, his vacations, his ridiculous failed businesses. I built my life, my career, and my company from nothing. I worked 80-hour weeks. I lived on ramen and cheap coffee. I took risks. I sacrificed. And you dare to sit there and tell me that I owe him? You are delusional." It was Uncle Robert who finally intervened. He had been watching the entire exchange with a look of grim resignation. He stood up and placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. He turned to my mother, his sister. "Helen, that is enough," he said, his voice calm but unyielding. "You need to listen to yourself. You are out of your minds. All of you. Stay out of this, Robert. This is a family matter." My father snapped, finally finding his voice to defend not his son, but the toxic dynamic that coddled him. "This stopped being a family matter when you decided your son was entitled to his sister's life's work," Robert retorted. He squeezed my shoulder gently. "Chloe, I think it's time for you to go. This is not a safe place for you anymore." He was right. The air was poison. I looked at their faces, my mother's rage, my father's weak blustering, my brother's greedy, tearful entitlement, and I felt nothing but a profound and desolate sense of finality. The family I had been trying to earn a place in, the love I had been quietly hoping to receive, it had never existed. It was all a mirage. I had just been a line item in their budget, an asset they never realized they had until they thought they could liquidate it for Leo. I grabbed my purse from the entryway, my movements stiff and robotic. I didn't say goodbye. There were no goodbyes left to say. As I walked to the door, my mother's voice followed me, a final, desperate, venomous volley. "You will regret this, Chloe. You are tearing this family apart. You are selfish and ungrateful, and you will die alone." I paused with my hand on the doorknob, my back to them. I turned my head slightly, just enough to speak over my shoulder. "You're wrong," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "You tore this family apart years ago. I'm just the one who finally noticed. And I'm not alone. I have my work, my friends, my life. What do you have? You have him." I gestured vaguely back towards the dining room, towards the man-child still sniffling on the floor. I opened the door and walked out into the cold December night, the festive lights of the neighborhood blurring through the tears I hadn't realized were streaming down my face. The scent of pine and cinnamon was gone, replaced by the clean, sharp, unforgiving air of reality. The haunting was over. Now, the war was about to begin. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and hollow grief. I kept replaying the scene in my head, each word, each expression etching itself into my memory. My mother's face, twisted with rage. Leo's pathetic, performative collapse. My father's utter spinelessness. It was like watching a recording of a plane crash you had somehow survived. The shock was so profound, it left no room for any other feeling. It wasn't until I was standing in my own quiet, minimalist apartment, the one I'd bought with my own money, that the full weight of it hit me. I sank onto my sofa. The silence of the room, a stark contrast to the chaos I had just left. The family I had, for all its flaws, believed was my foundation, was nothing but a sinkhole. My phone began to buzz incessantly, a barrage of texts and calls, first from my mother. The messages were a torrent of emotional blackmail. How could you do this to your brother? You've broken your father's heart. Leo is inconsolable. He says he can't go on. This will be on your head. Then came the threats. Don't think you can just walk away from your obligations. We know lawyers too, Chloe. Then, my father, his messages weaker, pleading, please just call your mother. Let's talk this through. Don't throw away your family over money. And Leo. His texts were the most unhinged. A string of demands, insults, and bizarre justifications. 15 mil is a bargain for what you did to my psyche. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. You always wanted to see me fail, and now you've done it. I stared at the screen, a cold dread creeping into my veins. This wasn't just a holiday argument that had gone too far. This was a declaration of war. They genuinely believed they had a claim to my life's work. Their delusion was absolute. I powered my phone off. The sudden silence was a relief, but it couldn't quiet the screaming in my own head. Uncle Robert called my landline a few minutes later. I let it ring for a moment before picking up, my hand trembling. Chloe, are you all right? His voice was a balm of sanity. No, I whispered, the single word cracking open the dam of my composure. I started to cry, not the theatrical sobs of my brother, but silent, gut-wrenching tears of a deep and irreversible loss. I wasn't just mourning the family I had. I was mourning the family I had desperately, foolishly, always hoped they could become. I know, he said softly. I know. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I've seen this coming for years, but I never imagined it would be this grotesque. They're completely unmoored from reality. He paused. I need you to listen to me very carefully. They are going to come after you, not just emotionally. I heard Helen talking to your father after you left. They're talking about legal action. They're convinced they can make a case for, I don't even know what, familial support, emotional distress, some nonsense they've cooked up. You need to protect yourself. How? I asked, my voice thick with tears. How do I protect myself from my own family? First, you treat them as what they are, hostile actors. Don't speak to them. Don't answer their texts or emails. Document everything. Save every single message. Write down exactly what happened tonight, word for word, while it's fresh. Second, and this is the most important part, first thing tomorrow morning, you are going to call a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a litigator, a shark. I have a name for you. Her name is Evelyn Albright. She's the best, and she specializes in complex family disputes and asset protection. Tell her I sent you. Do not wait, Chloe. Do it first thing. The practical advice anchored me. It gave me a task, a direction, a way to channel the maelstrom of emotions into action. The victim was being replaced by the strategist. Okay, I said, my voice firmer. Okay, Uncle Robert, I will. Good girl, he said. And Chloe, for what it's worth, I am so incredibly proud of you. What you've built, you did it on your own. Don't ever let them take that away from you. After we hung up, I did exactly as he said. I sat at my laptop and typed out a detailed, time-stamped account of the entire evening. Every insult, every demand, every theatrical tear. Then I took screenshots of every single text message and saved them to a secure cloud server. It felt cold and clinical, like gathering evidence for a trial, which, I realized with a sickening lurch, is exactly what I was doing. The next morning, I called Evelyn Albright's office at 8:59 a.m. Her assistant put me through immediately when I mentioned my uncle's name. Evelyn's voice was crisp, professional, and devoid of sentimentality. I recounted the story, feeling a strange sense of detachment as I laid out the facts. The lifelong coddling of my brother, the financial drain, the Christmas dinner explosion, the $15 million demand, the subsequent harassment. She listened without interruption. When I finished, there was a brief pause. Mister, she began, then corrected herself. Your uncle was right to have you call me immediately. The legal claim your family is threatening is frivolous and would be laughed out of any courtroom. There is no such thing as a legal right to a sibling's success. However, that doesn't mean they can't make your life a living hell. What do I do? I asked. For now, you maintain absolute radio silence. You will not respond to them in any way. You will forward every email, every text, every voicemail to my office. We will create a comprehensive log of harassment. I will draft a cease and desist letter to be sent to your parents and your brother via courier. It will state in no uncertain terms that any further contact will be considered harassment and will be met with an application for a restraining order. It will also inform them that all future communication must go through my office. A restraining order? Against my own parents? The idea was chilling. They have made a multi-million-dollar demand coupled with threats and emotional coercion, Miss Evans. They are no longer acting as your parents. They are acting as extortionists. We must treat them as such. The goal here is to build a wall around you so high and so thick they can't get through it. We need to make it clear that the Chloe they knew, the quiet, accommodating daughter, is gone. Hiring Evelyn Albright was like bringing a cannon to a knife fight, and it was the single best decision I made. The cease and desist letter went out that afternoon. The reaction was immediate and explosive. My family, unable to reach me directly, escalated their campaign. They started calling my office, leaving rambling, furious messages with my assistant. My mother tried to show up at my apartment building, but the doorman, following my new instructions, politely but firmly turned her away. Their next tactic was to weaponize the rest of the family against me. My phone started ringing with calls from aunts and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. The narrative they were spinning was a masterpiece of manipulation. They weren't telling people about the $15 million demand. Oh no! They were saying that I, in a fit of arrogance arrogant peek over my newfound wealth, had cruelly cut off my entire family for no reason, that my poor brother had some kind of breakdown because of the pressure, and my heartless response had been to disown them all. Some relatives bought it hook, line, and sinker. I received sanctimonious emails about the importance of family and how money changes people for the worse, but others, like my Uncle Robert, saw through it. A few cousins reached out privately, saying they'd always known the dynamic was skewed and that they were on my side. It was a painful but clarifying process, sifting through my own family tree and discovering who was a branch and who was just a snake hiding in the leaves. The most insidious part of their campaign was the character assassination. They knew my vulnerabilities. They knew about a difficult period I'd gone through in my early 20s after a bad breakup, a time when I'd struggled with anxiety and had seen a therapist. They began to seed rumors that I was mentally unstable, that my sudden success had triggered some kind of manic episode. My mother even called my office and told my assistant she was deeply concerned for Chloe's mental well-being and that I was not myself. It was a calculated, vicious attempt to discredit me, to paint me as an unreliable narrator of my own life. This was the part that almost broke me. The legal threats were abstract, but the attacks on my sanity were deeply personal. They were taking my past pain and twisting it into a weapon. I found myself doubting my own memory, my own reactions. Was I overreacting? Was I the selfish monster they painted me to be? The gaslighting was so intense, it felt like the walls were closing in. I started having trouble sleeping. My focus at work, normally laser sharp, began to fray. It was during a therapy session I'd started seeing someone new at Evelyn's recommendation that I had my rock bottom moment. I was recounting the latest volley of emails from a well-meaning but completely manipulated aunt, and I just broke down. Maybe they're right, I sobbed. Maybe I should just give them some money to make them go away. Maybe I am the one destroying everything. It would be easier. I can't live like this. My therapist, a calm, wise woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, listened patiently. When I was finished, she leaned forward slightly. "Chloe," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Let's reframe this. What you are describing is not a family dispute. It is a hostage situation. They are holding your peace of mind hostage, and their ransom demand is your money and your submission. Paying them would not make them go away. It would teach them that the tactic works. The demands would never, ever stop. The only way to win a hostage situation is to refuse to negotiate with the terrorists." The analogy was stark, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. Terrorists. Hostage situation. It snapped me out of my spiral of self-doubt. They were not negotiating in good faith. They were not a family seeking reconciliation. They were aggressors seeking to plunder my resources. From that day on, my resolve hardened into something unbreakable. I was no longer just defending myself. I was fighting for my life, for the right to exist on my own terms. Evelyn Albright, meanwhile, was not idle. She suggested we go on the offensive, but not in the way I expected. "They think you're just a girl who got lucky with a tech idea," she said during one of our meetings. "They have no idea who they're dealing with. They've underestimated you your entire life, and they're doing it now. Let's use that. They've accused you of financial malfeasance by hoarding your wealth. Let's do a little financial archaeology of our own." At her suggestion, we hired a forensic accountant. It felt like an extreme measure, but Evelyn insisted. "Your parents presented themselves as martyrs, sacrificing for their brilliant son. Let's see exactly what those sacrifices entailed. Let's put a number on their enabling." The process was painstaking. I had to dig up old bank statements, tax returns, any shred of financial documentation I could find from the past 15 years. The accountant began to piece together a timeline, a meticulous ledger of my family's financial life. What he uncovered was staggering, far worse than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just that they had paid for Leo's life, it was the scale of it. They had refinanced their house twice to fund his failed businesses. They had cashed out their 401 ks. The total amount they had poured into the black hole of Leo's ego was well over $2 million. They had systematically bankrupted themselves for him. This explained the desperation, the sheer ferocity of their attack on me. They weren't just trying to get Leo a payday, they were trying to recoup their own catastrophic losses. My success wasn't a happy surprise. It was a lottery ticket they believed they were entitled to cash. But then the accountant found the evidentiary turning point, the smoking gun that changed everything. 10 years ago, when I was just starting out and had very little, my parents had pressured me into co-signing a small business loan for Leo's Dog Biscuit Bakery. It was for $50,000. I had been reluctant, but they had laid the guilt on thick and I had caved. Leo, predictably, defaulted on the loan. I had spent 3 years paying it off myself, a crushing burden at the time. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. The accountant discovered another loan application from that same period to a different bank for $150,000. It had also been for the bakery. It had also been defaulted on and eventually written off by the bank after my parents paid a small settlement. And on the application, listed as the co-signer, with a perfect forgery of my signature, was my name. I stared at the document on Evelyn's conference table, a cold, sick feeling spreading through my stomach. My own parents had committed felony bank fraud using my name. They had exposed me to massive financial liability without my knowledge or consent. If that bank had decided to pursue me for the debt, it would have ruined me before I ever even started my company. "This is it," Evelyn said, her voice grim. "This is our leverage. This is the cannonball." The discovery shifted the entire dynamic. I was no longer just the victim of emotional abuse and harassment. I was the victim of a serious financial crime. The moral high ground they had so desperately tried to claim had just crumbled into dust beneath their feet. Evelyn's strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. We didn't threaten to go to the police. We didn't file a lawsuit. We did something much quieter and much more devastating. Evelyn drafted a new letter. This one was not addressed to my family. It was addressed to their lawyer, a small-town attorney who was likely working on contingency, dazzled by the prospect of a multi-million-dollar payout. The letter was short and to the point. It laid out our position, that their client's claim was baseless. It included a detailed summary of the harassment campaign, complete with dates, times, and excerpts from their own messages. And then, as the final exhibit, it included a crisp, clear copy of the fraudulent loan application with my forged signature. The letter concluded with a simple proposition. It was not a settlement offer. It was a demand. My family was to sign a legally binding agreement, a contract of non-contact and non-disparagement. They would agree to never contact me again, directly or indirectly. They would agree to never speak my name to any third party, press, or associate. They would relinquish any and all perceived claims on my assets, now and in the future. In return for their signatures on this document, the evidence of their bank fraud would remain a private matter between us. If they refused, or if they ever violated the agreement, we would not only pursue the maximum civil penalties, but also hand the file over to the district attorney's office. We were, in essence, offering them a choice: permanent, silent exile from my life, or the very real possibility of criminal prosecution and public disgrace. We had them cornered. Their lawyer, who I imagine had been dreaming of his 30% cut of $15 million, called Evelyn's office within an hour of the courier delivering the package. He was, by Evelyn's account, apoplectic. He blustered and threatened. He accused us of blackmail. Evelyn calmly replied that we were merely presenting his clients with the consequences of their actions. He demanded a meeting, a mediation. Evelyn agreed. Let them have their final scene, she told me. They need to see you, to see that you are not bluffing. You need to face them one last time, with the full weight of the law behind you. The formal confrontation was scheduled a week later in a neutral conference room at a mediation center. I walked in with Evelyn at my side. I felt strangely calm, my fear and grief replaced by a cold, surgical resolve. Uncle Robert was there too, at my request. He sat quietly in the corner, a silent witness, his presence a source of immense strength. My parents and Leo arrived a few minutes later with their lawyer. They looked smaller, diminished, stripped of their righteous fury. My mother's face was pale and drawn. My father avoided my gaze, staring intently at the wood grain of the conference table. Leo looked like a sulky teenager who had been dragged to the principal's office, his eyes red-rimmed and resentful. Their lawyer tried to open with a speech about family reconciliation and the pain my actions had caused. Evelyn cut him off before he could get through his first sentence. "We are not here to discuss feelings," she said, her voice like ice. "We are here to discuss the document in front of you. Your clients have two options: sign it or don't sign it. There will be no negotiation." My mother finally looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Chloe, please," she said, her voice a reedy whisper. "We're your family. You can't do this to us. It was a mistake. We were desperate. We did it for your brother. You committed a felony using my name," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. "You exposed me to financial ruin and never told me. You did that for him. Then, when you discovered I had succeeded despite you, you tried to extort $15 million from me. You did that for him. You slandered my name and tried to convince people I was mentally unstable. You did that for him. Every choice you made was for him. Now, for the first time, I am making a choice for me. Sign the paper." Leo suddenly slammed his fist on the table. "You think you're so much better than us now, don't you? With your fancy lawyer and your big money? You were always like this. Cold and selfish. Mom was right. You stole my future. That money should have been mine." "Leo, shut up," his own lawyer hissed, shooting him a furious glare. But it was too late. The final, pathetic confession. In his mind, it was still true. He was the victim. I was the thief. Nothing, not even the threat of prison, could penetrate that thick skull of entitlement. I looked at my father. He hadn't said a word. He just sat there, a hollowed-out man, a monument to his own weakness. "Dad?" I said, my voice softer. "Anything you want to say?" He finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with a weary sadness. "Your mother. We just wanted the best for Leo," he mumbled. "He just needed a little more help than you did, and that was it." The most honest thing he'd ever said to me. I hadn't needed their help, so I hadn't received their love. It was that simple. Their love was a form of crisis management, and I had never been enough of a crisis. Evelyn slid the document and a pen across the table. "Sign it," she repeated. My father picked up the pen first, his hand shaking. He signed his name without reading it. My mother watched him, tears silently tracking down her face. She took the pen from him and added her signature, her flourish at the end a shaky, defeated scrawl. Finally, the pen was pushed in front of Leo. He stared at it as if it were a snake. He looked at me, his eyes burning with a hatred that was terrifying in its intensity. He snatched the pen, scribbled his name with such force he nearly tore the paper, and threw it down on the table. It was done. Evelyn gathered the documents, placed them in her briefcase, and stood up. "This meeting is concluded," she announced. "A notarized copy will be sent to your counsel. Remember the terms. Any violation, no matter how small, will result in immediate action. We will be watching." I stood up and walked out of the room with Evelyn and my uncle, not looking back. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel relieved. I just felt empty. A vast, echoing emptiness where a family used to be. The verdict was in. Justice of a sort had been served, but it was a bitter, incomplete victory. I had won my freedom, but the price was an amputation. I had been forced to cut off my own limb to save my life. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. The silence from their side was absolute. No more calls, no more emails, no more flying monkeys sent to do their bidding. The agreement was holding. The first few months were the hardest. I kept expecting the other shoe to drop, for them to find some new way to torment me. I would jump every time my phone buzzed with an unknown number, but the silence held. The wall Evelyn had built was strong. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I poured myself into my work, but this time it wasn't an escape. It was a joy. My company was my creation, a testament to my own resilience and vision. We launched a new product, a piece of software that helped nonverbal children communicate. It was meaningful work, and it filled a part of the void inside me. I also focused on building my chosen family. My friendship with my Uncle Robert deepened into something truly special. We had dinner once a week. He became the father figure I never really had, offering quiet wisdom and unconditional support. I reconnected with the cousins who had reached out, building new bonds based on mutual respect rather than forced obligation. My close friends, who had watched the whole saga unfold with horror, rallied around me, reminding me that I was loved for who I was, not for what I could provide. Therapy became my sanctuary. With Dr. Sharma, I began the long, arduous process of unpacking a lifetime of emotional neglect. I grieved for the parents I never had. I learned to identify the subtle ways their dynamic had shaped me. My fierce independence that was also a defense mechanism, my reluctance to ask for help, my deep-seated fear that my worth was conditional. It was painful, exhausting work, like sorting through the wreckage of a collapsed building, piece by piece. I learned that the scars they left would likely never fully fade. There would always be a twinge of sadness on holidays, a pang of longing when I saw a happy family in a movie. The phantom limb of my amputated family would ache from time to time, but I was learning to live with it. The pain was no longer a constant, overwhelming roar. It was a quiet hum in the background, a reminder of the battle I had fought and won. One day, about a year after the mediation, Uncle Robert called me with some news. He had heard through the family grapevine that my parents had finally sold their house. They had been forced to, the foreclosure on Leo's house having wiped out their remaining finances. They had moved into a small rental apartment an hour away. And Leo? Leo had moved in with them. A 34-year-old man, living in a spare bedroom in his parents' two-bedroom apartment, still pursuing his next brilliant idea, still waiting for the world to recognize his genius. I felt a brief, sharp stab of something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't pity, and it wasn't satisfaction. It was just a profound, weary sadness for them, for the prison of their own making. They had sacrificed everything for him, and in the end, they had all ended up in the same small cage together. They had gotten what they wanted. They would always have him to take care of, and he would always have them to blame. I established my final, permanent boundaries. I had my number changed and my address made private. I instructed Evelyn to keep the file on the bank fraud open indefinitely, a silent deterrent against any future foolishness. I made peace with the fact that justice is rarely perfect. They would never understand what they did. They would never apologize. They would go to their graves believing that I was the villain of the story, the cold-hearted daughter who had hoarded her fortune and abandoned her family. And I had to be okay with that. Their narrative no longer had any power over me. I was the author of my own story now. Tonight, I'm sitting in my office on the top floor of the building my company now owns. The city lights spread out below me like a blanket of scattered diamonds. It's Christmas Eve. There's no roasted pine or cinnamon in the air. Just the clean, sterile smell of glass and steel and the faint aroma of coffee from the machine in the corner. It's quiet. It's peaceful. It's mine. I know that the greatest success of my life wasn't building a $25 million company from scratch. It was surviving my own family. It was learning that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away. It was understanding that I didn't steal Leo's future. I just refused to let him and my parents steal mine. And in the quiet hum of the city below, I finally feel free. I am not a ghost anymore. I am here, and I am whole.